I am a reptile from the early Carboniferous. Yes, reptile. Reptiles exist in the fossil record starting in the Carboniferous. Now, there are no lizards, snakes, crocodiles, dinosaurs, turtles, or the reptiles which you may be thinking of. I'm about it here in the early Carboniferous. I'm about a foot long, and I am a transitional form in that, while I am more advanced than the amphibians of my day, I still have a number of features which are more typical of amphibians than any reptiles which come after me. I still have teeth on the roof of my mouth. I still have a notochord which goes through my vertebral column, and my vertebrae are not fused. I don't have the back of my skull very well fused. I have dermal scales on my underside, kind of like fish, something that some of the early amphibians retained as well. Many of my bones, such as those of my digits, are more similar to the amphibians than those reptiles which will follow me. So I am a transitional form partway between the amphibians which came before and the reptiles which will come later. I am one of the first reptiles known from the early Carboniferous. Now, we're not very big yet, only about a foot long, but we are better adapted at living on land than most of the amphibians. You can see changes in so much of our skeleton. Our vertebral column is getting stronger, even though we don't have solid vertebrae yet. We still have a notochord. And although the limbs of the first reptiles are very similar to those of the amphibians, they're becoming better adapted to support weight on land. So we're better at moving on land. We're also better at reproducing on land. There's a number of changes in the first reptiles which make us different from the amphibians. First, like the water snakes you can see in this image here, which are later reptiles, we don't have to mate in the water. Males possess a penis, an organ which can introduce gametes into the body of the female. Amphibians simply don't do that. Most of their fertilization occurs outside the body of the female. Plus, the eggs can be laid on land because they have some membranes which surround the embryos, which protect them from water loss. And so we're better at moving on land, and we're better at mating and laying eggs on land. And so altogether, we reptiles are more adapted for land living than the amphibians were. Right, I'm an insect eater, I'm a little reptile, and there's about all I can catch, but I'm very active, and that helps me catch these little insects. And one of the reasons I can be very active is because of changes in the way I breathe. I don't have to suck air in and spit air out like the amphibians do with their neck muscles and the throat muscles. Instead, what I do is I change how big my chest is using my ribs and the muscles that attach to them. That way I can bring in more oxygen every single time I breathe. Because of that, I don't need to breathe through my skin like the amphibians do. And because I don't need to breathe through my skin, I can put scales on my skin. And with scales on my skin, I don't have to stay wet all day, and I can be in very hot, dry places without worrying about water loss. And so I'm much more adapted to land because I've changed the way that I breathe.